With our NTP review in the books, we are now going to dive into NTP authentication, and I'm going to do something a little bit different here. We've got plenty of lab work ahead, but I'm going to show you the correct configuration for NTP authentication between routers 1 and 2 here, with 1 being our server, 2 being our client. I'm going to show you the correct configuration first on the board. Then I'm going to show you an incorrect configuration on the board, which is also running on our routers, and that will give me a good excuse to show you not only a couple of show commands that you saw in the previous videos, but also another show command that you usually don't see in your CCNA studies, and a couple of debugs as well. So we're going to do some troubleshooting, some lab work here, and when we're done with all of that, hopefully everything will be working. But we're going to start here with our server client, and when things are correct, here's what our server config is going to look like. Now the NTP master 1 command, we need that anyway, besides authentication. And of course the number there is what again? NTP master 1. What is that? Does that have anything to do with the trusted key or the authentication key? No, it does not. That number there is the stratum. So that's also why I use the number 1 throughout this, because it's like, okay, are these ones related in the config? It's a good practice exam question. And the answer is no. NTP master and then that number, that's the stratum. Now, it doesn't matter in which order you enter the NTP trusted key and NTP authentication key commands, but you got to have them both. Because what you're doing first is creating an authentication key with the authentication key command, and that's the key number we put with it with 1, and then MD5, which is, by the way, the only option you have there, and I'll be glad to show you that in iOS help as well. And then finally you enter the key itself, you enter the password. Then you have to trust the key. And the trusted key command, that's the first thing I would check in an NTP authentication config that wasn't working. Because, you know, as long as you have connectivity to the master, you know, you check your IP addresses first. Then I would check to see if the trusted key command is on there. I think that we have so many other authentications that just take one step. You know, you create that key and you're pretty much done. And you don't really have to say, okay, I trust this authentication key. But in NTP, you've got to do that. You're going to need to put that NTP trusted key command, and that number should match what you have there with NTP authentication key. Whew. Now let's take a look at the client. It's a lot easier done than said. You've got the server command that you would need anyway, NTP server, and here that would be 10.1.1.1, but you've got to add the key now at the end of it. So if you're going from an unauthenticated NTP config that is working to one that you want to run authentication, then you need to go in and tack on that key command to your NTP server command. You still need the trusted key and authentication key, but what you need on the client that is not required on the server is NTP authenticate. So again, that's why we have 4 commands over here on the client and only 3 on the server. Now, if you've seen in some books or some configs or some labs or anywhere where NTP authenticate is on both the client and the server, that's okay. It really doesn't hurt anything, but I do want to point out that with NTP, what's really happening with NTP authentication is that the client is making sure the server is trusted. Because with authentication, you tend to think, when you see server client with authentication, what do you think first? Well, the server is going to make sure the client is who the client says he is. That's not really what's going on with NTP. What's going on with the client is it's saying, okay, I will accept time updates only from a device that I can trust with the information that I have been configured with. So router 2 is really looking at router 1 and saying, okay, you know, do you have this key number? You know, is it trusted? And is the key content, is the actual password correct? If all those things are fine, then everything is beautiful. In our lab right now, though, I have a feeling that everything is not beautiful. Let me go ahead and bring that up. And I'm going to be a little offline there, no big deal. But you can see here on router 2, so I'm on the client right now. And the only thing that's off screen right there is the dispersal. We're not going to worry about that right now because frankly we have bigger fish to fry because we don't have a real association with the NTP server. How do we know that? A couple things here. First off, you know from watching those review videos that with NTP it's not enough to have the address of the server showing up here on the client. there's 10111, and those brand new to NTP might think, well, hey, I've got an association because it's got a reference clock and everything else. Well, that reference clock of all zeros might be a tip-off, but a stratum of 16 is definitely a tip-off. And we just see the little squiggly here, which means it's configured, but that doesn't mean it's synced. And it's configured because I put NTP server 10111 and then key 1. So all that's good. And what if I ran our other favorite command, which is show NTP status? Well, here we're really going to be told things aren't going well because it's unsynchronized, the stratum is 15, no reference clock, the reference time is all zeros, and the UTC, it's partying like it's January 1st, 1900, and none of that is good for us. So let's just say, though, that you walked right into this, because let me show you what I'm going to show you what's missing. I'm going to show you what's missing, then we're going to go through the lab. All I've done here is left the trusted key command off of router 1. I'm not sure why this tends to be the error that creeps into configs, but it is on the server. And on router 2 right now, I have everything the way it should be. I've got the server set up correctly, key, trusted key, authentication key, NTP authentication. So I'm not pulling any fast ones on you here. All I did was leave the trusted key command off R1 because I want you to see what things look like when that happens. So right now, though, we don't really have any clues as to what's going on because you'll notice that there is no mention of authentication in either one of these commands. Show NTP association, show NTP status, no reference to authentication. So we need to go into a little more detail, and I'm using that word specifically because the command I'm going to show you here is show NTP association detail. And if you want details, by golly, you came to the right place. And I don't care what business you're in, the combination of insane and invalid is never a good thing. I think you'll agree with me on that. We got plenty of zeros after that to show us also that things aren't going particularly well. But anytime you run this and you see insane, invalid, then we have some work to do. But still, I don't see any kind of mention here of authentication at all. So what I am going to do is run a couple of debugs. Let's do a debug NTP, see what our options are. We have quite a few here, relatively speaking, of course, but I'm going to go with packet, and then I want to go with authentication. And I want to warn you, of course, anything with NTP, this can take a little while, so I may actually pause the video here for a moment. But if you run debug NTP and you've just configured NTP literally seconds before that, you can get screens of information. That's why I pre-configured it. I wanted the screen to be kind of clear here. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. We're hitting the 8-minute mark. I'm going to stop here, and when you come back, we'll see the output of these debugs and see if that shows us anything. See you there.